Philip, sorry. Alexandre will present in Portuguese, but after, if you need some to talk with us during the presentation, you can message us, and anything you need help, we are here, okay?
Okay. I will make myself noticed when necessary. Yes.
Thank you.
Alguém pode conferir se tá no YouTube mesmo?
Tá no YouTube.
Tá?
They will live streaming in YouTube.
Okay.
So if you want to share with someone, feel free. I think that Mateus has the link, and they will share with us the link for the live transmission.
Okay.
Tá funcionando direitinho, tá, Matheus?
So I will start. I will present the event in English to include Philip. Good afternoon to everyone. My name is Mônia Silva, coordinator of the postgraduate program in psychology at Universidade Federal de São João del Rei, and I would like to extend a warm welcome and express my gratitude to all the individuals in attendance. I want to give a special thanks to the professors Alexandre and Philip for sharing their research fields and knowledge with us today. I would like to thank you, Marco, the academic board, and Adam and Mateus for the support in the organization of this event, and to express my appreciation for the professors and students of this program. Now I will present briefly our professors. Alexandre is a psychologist, PhD in psychological assessment with focus on tests construction for the University of San Francisco, founder of Metacognitive, member of the publication committee of the International Test Commission, and engaged in the application of information technologies in the field of health and education. And Philip is professor and researcher at the Luxembourg Center for Educational Testing, University of Luxembourg, specialization in test development in evaluation of educational monitoring programs in several countries. So thanks for everybody, and we can start our presentations. Marco, if you want to say something. And no audio.
Just say thank you for everybody, and a very nice event to us.
And sorry for my English, people.
So thank you, Mônia, for your introduction. I would like to say thank you to Philip and to everyone that's with us this afternoon. So my presentation will be carried on in Portuguese because for more accessibility for the students and for me too. And I'd like to say sorry for Felipe, but we could provide after the presentation could provide the subtitles for the video for my presentation. So I will turn now to Portuguese. Obrigado a todos pela presença, e eu vou compartilhar a tela com vocês. Quando tiver tudo ok, por favor, me avisem.
Não, o Felipe chegou e agora ele falou que quer dormir com o Felipe.
Estão vendo?
Sim, tá perfeito, Alexandre. Obrigado.
Beleza, então o tema da minha apresentação será de inteligências artificiais como ferramentas de pesquisa, e eu agradeço o convite da professora Mônia, do professor Marco, e vocês fiquem à vontade para o final do evento trazerem as perguntas que vocês tiverem, né? A Mônia já fez as apresentações, hoje eu faço pós-doutorado no Laboratório de Neurociências Cognitiva e Social da Universidade Presbiteriana Mackenzie, então, além de todas essas questões que a Mônia trouxe. Tá? A minha apresentação, ela tem a intenção de durar cerca de 15 a 20 minutos para que nós possamos, então, passar para a apresentação do professor Philip. E para falar de inteligência artificial, mais antes tarde do que nunca, a gente precisa falar sobre esse renovado interesse que as inteligências artificiais tiveram quando, no dia 30 de novembro do ano passado, né, foi lançado o ChatGPT pela OpenAI. Tá? Então, o lançamento dessa ferramenta ChatGPT, que eu acredito que você já deve ter experimentado, né, talvez até feito algum trabalho de faculdade, usando um suporte, um apoio dessa ferramenta, ele causou um enorme impacto em toda a sociedade, não apenas no âmbito da pesquisa em si, mas um impacto da aplicação efetiva e ativa da inteligência artificial no âmbito da vida cotidiana. Então, e com múltiplos propósitos, né? Então, hoje, com essa ferramenta do ChatGPT, nós temos condições de fazer traduções, tirar dúvidas, gerar códigos, enfim. Cada um deve ter experimentado de alguma maneira e de alguma forma, né? E todo mundo foi muito impressionado, tanto é que você pode ver pelos gráficos, né, que o uso a busca pelo termo de inteligência artificial, que já era uma busca efetivamente grande, ele disparou, né, independente da métrica que você olhar, seja no Google Trends, seja observando as métricas tiradas do Estatística aqui em cima, disparou, então, desde o final do ano passado e tem alcançado níveis cada vez mais estratosféricos, sem contar as repercussões no mercado de trabalho, sem contar as repercussões, os medos, enfim, todos os aspectos associados a essa emergência desse tema, que já foi alvo, né, anteriormente de interesse. Tá? Só que qual que é o grande ponto? Muitas vezes a gente nem sabe o que é inteligência artificial. Então, esse interesse renovado, ele trouxe muito a questão aplicada, mas efetivamente a gente nem sabe o que é, nem sabe quando surgiu a inteligência artificial. Tá? E quando que a inteligência artificial surgiu? Se a gente for olhar os marcadores históricos, a gente pode traçar esse retorno, né? Óbvio, a gente pode traçar lá no Pascal, quando ele inventou alguns algoritmos, né? As máquinas autônomas do Pascal, que foram os primeiros protótipos de robôs mais antigos, mas enfim, de uma maneira mais sistematizada, uma linha coerente, ela começou em 1943 com McCulloch e com Pitts, que lançaram um paper chamado A Logical Calculus of Ideas Emanating Nervous Activity, em que eles conseguiram efetivamente traçar um paralelo matemático para o funcionamento do sistema nervoso, para o sistema neuronal. E esse artigo ele é tão importante que ele é a base, né, do que vieram a ser depois os cálculos de redes neurais, enfim, a gente vai chegar nesse ponto. Talvez o mais conhecido de todos e que é considerado por muitas das literaturas como o marco essencial do nascimento do campo da inteligência artificial foi justamente o trabalho do Alan Turing em declarar, né, o teste de Turing, formalizar a estrutura do teste de Turing, que todo mundo já deve conhecer, mas, enfim, que basicamente versa, né, que uma máquina, ela seria uma máquina autônoma, uma máquina inteligente, na medida em que um ser humano não conseguir diferenciar a resposta daquela máquina, daquele autômato, para uma resposta de um ser humano. Então, basicamente, esse é o teste Turing na década de 50, e como vocês podem ver, então, pelos traços da linha, né, a gente tem alguns outros marcos importantes, como na década de 80, o nascimento efetivo do campo de redes neurais, né, de neural networks, o surgimento da linguagem de processamento de linguagem natural nos inícios dos anos 2000, e assim sucessivamente até nós chegamos, né, com essas marcações, com esses impactos que nós tivemos mais à frente. Tá? Então, quais são os grandes marcos, os grandes aprendizados? Né? O desenvolvimento da inteligência artificial em termos históricos, ele é curto, ele tem menos de 100 anos, e efetivamente ele tem se trabalhado em saltos, assim como qualquer campo novo dentro de uma área de conhecimento, tá? Só que também nós na psicologia já sabemos bem, ou nos deparamos com esse tipo de problema, existe uma definição ou uma dificuldade em se definir o que é inteligência artificial. Ou seja, por mais surpreendente que pode parecer, não existe uma definição conceitual, consensual, sobre o que seria inteligência artificial. E essa talvez já seja o primeiro ponto, do ponto de vista da filosofia, da ciência, em que nós tenhamos aí uma oportunidade de pesquisa, uma oportunidade de compreensão, de entendimento da pesquisa, né? Seria justamente trabalhar uma definição. E eu trouxe para você duas definições de duas referências bastante importantes. A primeira delas, do ABAS, é um editorial que justamente traz essa questão, What is Artificial Intelligence? É do I3E, Transactions on Artificial Intelligence, um dos journals mais importantes das referências dentro da área de inteligência artificial. E esse editorial é bastante interessante, por quê? Porque ele comenta sobre a dificuldade dessa definição do campo, né? E ele coloca que o papel que ele vai se valer da autoridade dele como editor de um jornal, de uma revista importante no campo, para tentar, então, trabalhar essa definição.
Eu acho que o Alexandre... Ah, voltou.
Acho que eu caí por um segundo, né?
Sim. Tudo bem, acontece.
Voltando. Então é bastante intrigante essa questão, né? Sobre o que seria, então, como automatizar a cognição, seria um aspecto unicamente mecanicista da cognição, a inteligência artificial. E no âmbito da segunda definição, eu acho que ela tem um alcance bem relevante para outros tipos de discussões que nós podemos ter. A inteligência artificial seria um fenômeno social e cognitivo que permitiria que uma máquina se integre socialmente a uma sociedade, para realizar tarefas competitivas que exigem processos cognitivos e se comunicar com Eu acho que vai ser a última vez que isso vai acontecer. E olha que eu estou com a internet cabeada hoje. E se comunicar, então, com comunidades da sociedade por meio dessa troca de mensagens com alto conteúdo de informações e representações mais curtas. Então, nesse sentido, você tira o aspecto tecnológico nessa segunda definição e você coloca um papel social, ou seja, o meio de integração social de máquinas com uma sociedade humana, né? Do ponto de vista de uma outra introdução, eu trouxe a publicação, né, o livro do Russell e do Norvig, que é hoje o principal livro adotado nas graduações e nos cursos de inteligência artificial, que trabalha, então, com uma perspectiva de duas dimensões, contrastando duas dimensões. Basicamente, na perspectiva deles, toda a história da inteligência, da tentativa de definir o que é uma inteligência artificial, ela parte da dialética entre a performance humana, ou seja, sistemas que que otimizariam o papel, né, o desempenho do ser humano, contra aqueles de racionalidade pura. Então, a inteligência artificial como mecanismos, mecânicas, algoritmos de racionalidade, né, pura, de pura lógica. E contrastando também uma outra dialética, né, que seria do pensamento, ou seja, as ações do pensamento, as ações de pensar, como as ações inerentes a uma inteligência artificial, aquela do comportamento, ou seja, da adaptação comportamental. Então, talvez o que você quisesse seria uma definição mais clara do que é inteligência artificial, mas o que essas literaturas têm apontado, né, essas referências maiores têm apontado para a gente, é que há um grande vácuo do ponto de vista teórico-conceitual em se conseguir entender até mesmo o que seria inteligência artificial. Tá? Então, seria a inteligência artificial uma unidade, um campo? Do que a gente está falando quando a gente fala de inteligência artificial? Isso fica mais claro quando a gente percebe, então, uma organização geral de todos os subcampos da AI. Tá? Por que eu quis trazer isso? Porque muitas das vezes a gente não sabe efetivamente o que a gente quer ou sobre o que a gente está falando quando a gente está trazendo a inteligência artificial. O campo da inteligência artificial congrega áreas que vão desde um machine learning, um deep learning, que é parte do machine learning, né, a sistemas baseados em conhecimento, a computação visual, por exemplo, aqueles algoritmos que vão ler a radiografia para verificar se encontram algum padrão, alguma doença, né? Vão ler a tomografia para ver do cérebro para ver se tem alguma alteração que o visível, né, ou não visível. A robótica, processamento de linguagem natural, automação, otimização, ou seja, a dificuldade de se definir a inteligência artificial é que há uma abrangência de campos na inteligência artificial. Então, o primeiro passo quando a gente tem que pensar em pesquisa, né, é sobre basicamente tudo pode ser impactado pela inteligência artificial, porque a inteligência artificial é um grande guarda-chuva de uma série de técnicas, estratégias e conceitualizações. Mas, ao mesmo tempo, existem algumas áreas que eu quero frisar para vocês a partir de agora, que eu acredito que tem um impacto mais imediato à psicologia nesse exato momento. Tá? O que eu estou trazendo para vocês, essa montagem aí desse AIs Here, ela veio no Monitor on Psychology de julho, né? Julho e agosto desse ano. Na hora ela abre essa imagem, né? Ready or Not, AIs Here. Ela veio como, então, a capa da reportagem que discute alguns aspectos do impacto na psicologia das novas, né, aplicações ou dos novos usos da inteligência artificial. E aí a gente o que eu queria convidar para vocês é refletir como que a prática da psicologia, pensando em suas diferentes facetas, contextos, ela está sendo impactada, porque ela não será impactada, ela já está sendo impactada pelo uso da inteligência artificial. Então, se a gente for pensar na clínica, a gente tem hoje aplicativos, chatbots, a gente tem uma série de produtos que já utilizam de algumas das técnicas ou estratégias de inteligência artificial e outros que estão sendo desenvolvidos, estão sendo aperfeiçoados para utilizar talvez aquelas que tenham sido tenham voltado ao hype, né, como o caso dos modelos generativos, tipo ChatGPT, GPT, e que não eram muito comuns. Né? Um exemplo, a Metacognitivo desenvolve jogos sérios. Então, a gente tem jogos sérios hoje no mercado que, como qualquer aplicação em game, vão utilizar de técnicas de inteligência artificial para gerar conteúdo, para gerar procedimentos, ou seja, já são tecnologias que estavam disponíveis antes até desse hype ter voltado. Mas, ao mesmo tempo, a gente tem visto o quê? Novas falas do tipo, eu quero gerar itens, eu quero gerar interpretações baseadas em resultados imediatos, que talvez vão impactar de uma maneira maior. Isso daí vai mudar a forma como a gente faz uma avaliação num processo de seleção, num processo de recrutamento, vai mudar as leituras clínicas, inclusive vai mudar a forma como a gente faz a psicometria, né? Já está transformando, como que a gente integra essa questão da psicometria, ou seja, todos os impactos que a gente pode enxergar a partir daí. E aí, dentro do que eu queria trazer para vocês, eu acredito que existem algumas técnicas que têm um potencial mais imediato de impactarem na prática psicológica, tá? E principalmente aquelas relacionadas à pesquisa, tá? A primeira delas, e talvez é aquela que eu tenho um pouco mais de proximidade, que eu posso falar com muito mais autoridade, seria a prática de machine learning. Como visto em alguns slides atrás, a prática de machine learning ela vai incluir, né, modelos também que existem, modelos com características distintas, com aplicações distintas, inclusive os modelos generativos que a gente tem falado, modelos linguísticos, deep learning, modelos de redes neurais, enfim. Então, é uma grande área, né, mesmo ela sendo uma sub-área da inteligência artificial. E aí o que os autores têm trabalhado, articulado nessa área, é de que, do ponto de vista do impacto na pesquisa psicológica mais imediato, seria a adoção de técnicas, né, de machine learning como um complemento, né, e eu chamo até como uma adição dentro do campo da psicometria, na minha opinião, tá? Análise inferencial, tendo como objetivos o desenvolvimento primário, né, as áreas de maior impacto, o desenvolvimento de modelos que poderiam ter um maior grau de generalização do que os modelos que nós temos hoje, né? Nós vivemos uma replication crisis não só por causa do p-valor, mas também por quê? Porque a gente trabalha com bancos pequenos, a gente trabalha com modelos que têm restrições ou que têm pressupostos muito fortes e que muitas vezes não são seguidos, ou seja, a gente usa a estatística para ganhar algum tipo de insight, mas ainda assim ela é insuficiente para que a gente possa confiar em termos de generalização ou de replicação dos modelos em novos dados. E aí, nesse sentido, os modelos de machine learning, né, eles possuem, independente do seu propósito, algumas restrições, alguns pressupostos mais fracos do que os modelos preditivos, então, da estatística inferencial, e eles podem ser, eles têm uma maior capacidade, né, de predizer ou categorizar variáveis a partir de grandes massas de dados, que essa é um outro aspecto. Hoje a gente tem acesso à massa de dados, mas os nossos métodos são insuficientes para isso. Então, quando a gente traz para a pesquisa, adota técnicas, né, de machine learning, a gente acaba tendo uma capacidade de modelar ou de desvelar relações ou padrões complexos que estão nesses dados, tá? E, além disso, desenvolver, então, modelos focados em predição também em nível individual. Existem alguns modelos mais contemporâneos que usam, por exemplo, grafos, que você consegue resolver um problema, né, o problema do monotético e ideográfico, né? Ou seja, de fazer predições ou de fazer inferências a partir de populações ou indivíduos. Aí tem aquela dissociação clássica na psicometria, em que quando você fala do grupo, você não consegue falar das pessoas, você tem que usar técnicas diferentes, enfim. Machine Learning consegue romper essa dicotomia e, ao mesmo tempo, você trazer informações que são de grupo e de indivíduos a partir de uma análise específica de dados. Então, em termos de aplicações, a gente pode pensar, então, integração com as técnicas psicométricas para complementar as propriedades psicométricas que nós estamos investigando, tá? Integração com biodados, essa é uma grande vantagem, porque biodados são dados muito complexos, principalmente porque a gente está trabalhando com séries temporais, a gente está trabalhando com grandes volumes, né, com dados discretos. Então, quando a gente começa a trabalhar com a integração de biodado, e às vezes em tempo real, a gente precisa usar técnicas de machine learning para que elas sejam aplicáveis juntos às outras técnicas que a gente cotidianamente já utiliza. Então, por exemplo, eu tenho exemplos de jogos que utilizam leitura de EEG de um canal em tempo real para mudar os parâmetros do jogo, né? Ou seja, às vezes, se for uma intervenção, eu consigo mudar a intensidade da intervenção, eu consigo, por exemplo, verificar em tempo real o grau de atenção, o grau de motivação do indivíduo que está jogando aquele jogo, né? E eles são muito utilizados em apps para apoio diagnóstico. Então, eu trouxe um paper que exemplifica isso, do World Psychiatry, que é um journal na área de psiquiatria com um fator de impacto enorme, né, em que você traz, então, a promessa, né, para exemplificar para vocês na literatura, do uso de machine learning, tratamentos que podem predizer, por exemplo, doenças, condições psiquiátricas. Então, são alternativas que têm sido bastante exploradas, e aqui na Método Cognitivo a gente tem feito pesquisas dentro dessa área também, né, que vão verificar, por exemplo, a capacidade da gente antecipar um suicídio, né? Ou antecipar um risco de desenvolvimento de uma determinada doença mental, e a gente consegue atuar em tempo hábil para que aquela pessoa não sofra todos os problemas associados ao desenvolvimento daquela condição, né? Trazendo uma outra técnica, por exemplo, a técnica de processamento de linguagem natural, Natural Language Processing, né? Que é uma abordagem cujo objetivo dela é o quê? Simular ou realizar o processamento da linguagem como um ser humano. E dentro da definição de NLP, tem um aspecto bastante importante. Ela quer processar a linguagem, ela não quer compreender a linguagem. E isso daí é herdado pelos modelos LLM, né? Apesar desses modelos eles serem mais capazes de trazer informações de contexto, informações que permitem a gente ter uma contextualização e um uso de léxicos ou de palavras, de linguagem, mais adequado àquele contexto que a gente está realizando a pergunta, está usando um prompt, né? Na verdade, ele não compreende, mas ele vai calcular, né, probabilidades, a partir de probabilidades, para poder compreender o que ele pode trazer de informações, né, de palavras, de letras, que reproduzam as capacidades, então, que a LEAD diz que todo algoritmo de NLP deve ter. Seria parafrasear um texto introduzido, né, um input de um texto, traduzir um texto de outro idioma, responder questões sobre conteúdos de um texto, ou tirar conclusões a partir daquele texto, né? Então, eu trouxe o NLP, mas eu não quis trazer generativo, para a gente poder ver que existem todo um outro campo, né? E porque o generativo, ele herda características do NLP. E que tipo de aplicações a gente pode usar, então, NLP? Tá? Esse paper é um paper, então, do Sinahai, com o Zheng, que eles são do ETS, né, do Educational Test Service, nos Estados Unidos, e, basicamente, eles estão testando modelos de NLP, esse artigo é de 2022, para poder fazer a correção, né, dos textos, das redações, né, e verificar, por exemplo, fazer a correção daquela redação, verificar características, né, de qualidade daquele texto, minimizando até a subjetividade dos avaliadores que estão dentro dessa abordagem, né? E é interessante que o Sinahai, eu conheço ele, conheci ele em 2009, o Sinahai, ele trabalhava com modelos de TRI para calibração de juízes, né? Ou seja, para equalizar juízes que faziam avaliações desses ensaios. Ou seja, é um desenvolvimento natural a gente partir, né, para modelos computacionais que consigam realizar o mesmo tipo de avaliação que um juiz, ao invés da gente ter que ficar calibrando esses juízes, equilibrando isso para gerar mais equidade, né? Então, a gente tem exemplos do uso de NLP em chatbots, em aplicações que vão do texto para fala, né? Então, tem um paper que testou pessoas que tinham problemas auditivos e não conseguiam falar, e eles entravam com o texto e a partir disso a aplicação conseguia falar para ter uma conversa, né, para eles conseguirem ter um tipo de interação de outra natureza, e estava testando como que isso modificava a interação com essas pessoas, né? O speech to text é justamente você pegar uma fala e conseguir traduzir ela em um texto, tá? E eu vou dar um exemplo de algo que a gente está desenvolvendo aqui. A gente tem uma aplicação prototipada em que a gente está fazendo avaliações de características de alfabetização, né? Então, domínio fonético, coisas dessa natureza, com uma aplicação que faz essa análise em tempo real, e uma das técnicas que a gente usa é o speech to text. Então, a criança, ela responde ao item falando, e a gente já consegue tirar algumas métricas que hoje são trabalhadas em testes, né, que precisam ser corrigidas pelo avaliador em testes de predição ou testes de pré-alfabetização, né, de preditores de alfabetização. E análises textuais como aquela que eu mostrei para vocês. Tá? Então, esses exemplos, eu poderia me esgotar em vários exemplos aqui, são para trazer, então, uma ideia geral do que a gente pensa, né? Mas a gente tem uma série de outras aplicações que poderiam ser pensadas, análise de sentimentos, insights que viriam a partir de modelos de negócios ou modelos de perguntas para clientes, no caso de empresas, aumentando as capacidades, aplicações de AI para aumentar as capacidades humanas, né? Então, imagina, eu posso pensar numa perspectiva bem cyberpunk, de ter um implante, de ter de conseguir, por exemplo, são as pesquisas que são feitas, né? De você pegar e implantar eletrodos em áreas de recepção visual primária para que pessoas cegas possam enxergar utilizando um outro device. Reconhecimento de imagem. Imagina, daqui a pouco eu posso estar corrigindo, né, um teste expressivo, um HTP, uma coisa assim, utilizando uma inteligência artificial, consiga reduzir a subjetividade, aumentar a precisão dessa correção. Ou seja, existe um campo imenso, né, se a gente for pensar em diferentes áreas, e também a capacidade da gente trazer outros sentidos que hoje são deixados de lado pelas técnicas que nós temos, né? principalmente no âmbito de uma avaliação, né? Então, características visuais, a gente nem citou aqui, né, o uso de um conjunto de inteligência artificial com realidade virtual, realidade ampliada, enfim, mas trazendo, por exemplo, estimulações, mensurações auditivas, sensoriais, de outra natureza, que são medidas que nós não conseguimos acessar com os nossos aparelhos sensoriais de uma maneira objetiva, mas que são possíveis de ser alcançadas por meio da análise usando inteligência artificial e as técnicas que a compõem. Do ponto de vista de riscos, é óbvio, né? Usar a inteligência artificial tem risco, e aí, para quem não pegou a referência do Skynet, né? Então, seria do Exterminador do Futuro, do Terminator, que é a inteligência artificial que basicamente domina toda a humanidade, né? Mas, basicamente, assim, a gente tem que pensar nesses riscos, das implicações do AI nas diferentes áreas da sociedade, né? Sobre segurança dos algoritmos, será que vai ter uma quebra no mercado de trabalho? Quais são os critérios que a gente está utilizando, éticos, de valores? Quais são os limites que a gente está impondo? Será que a gente pode treinar de qualquer jeito? Né? Tem uma preocupação hoje na pesquisa de inclusão de minorias, né? Então, você incluir que são muito renegados, né? Às vezes, principalmente nos Estados Unidos, populações negras, indígenas, aqui no Brasil, né? Populações de certas características sociodemográficas e que muitas vezes não estão representados na pesquisa e acabam gerando uma limitação da generalização daquelas inferências. A gente acaba criando referenciais que são muito específicos de um certo grupo social, né? Em cada país a gente tem essas características, justamente pela disponibilidade de acesso a essas pessoas na pesquisa, né? Então, esse é um tipo de risco. Aí eu trouxe até o Pulse Giant AI Experiments, que é uma carta aberta que circulou muito no primeiro semestre, querendo uma interrupção, né, do treinamento de novas AIs. Né? Outra área, que é até uma área interessante para a gente pensar na pesquisa, como que a adoção das AIs no dia a dia vai impactar no comportamento humano. Esse paper é de 2023 agora, basicamente o que ele traz, né? Que a discriminação algorítmica, então, às vezes relacionadas a questões raciais, a questões de gênero, ela causa menos indignação moral, dentro do experimento que foi feito no artigo, do que a discriminação humana. Ou seja, né, tipo, como assim? Como que essas novas AIs, como que o ser humano, nós mesmos vamos interpretar, vamos nos relacionar com elas? Por que quando é um algoritmo, eu tenho que ficar menos indignado que quando é um indivíduo? Né? Tem um outro experimento que esse experimento não está publicado ainda, ele está em um working paper, que foi feito num hotel na Tailândia, em que tinham alguns autômatos, né, alguns robôs, e seres humanos atendendo. E aí as pessoas, o que os pesquisadores perceberam até agora? Que as pessoas, depois que elas eram atendidas pelos robôs, elas tendiam a ter menos respeito do que aos seres humanos que iam atendê-las. Então, isso acabava moderando, né, o comportamento posterior dele, o fato de ser atendido previamente por um robô, por uma inteligência artificial. Então, essa é uma área interessante assim, de pesquisa, como que vai mudar esse comportamento. Né? E aí, trazendo os riscos, né, como garantir também privacidade, transparência, equidade, garantir o comportamento ético das AIs, quão resiliente uma AI é para virar um Skynet, né? Qual vai ser o impacto social desse uso? Como que a gente vai olhar os objetivos de desenvolvimento sustentável da ONU a partir dessa ótica de adoção dessas ferramentas? E aí, para esse tópico específico, eu queria trazer o que a gente tem desenvolvido na Metacognitive, né, um trabalho que nós temos realizado aqui. Então, nós desenvolvemos jogos e ferramentas para avaliação, monitoramento e treinamento de habilidades cognitivas, socioemocionais, e também para sintomatologia, da psiquiatria, né? E nós somos parte do INCT em Neurotecnologia Responsável, né? Que tem o objetivo justamente de avaliar, né, desafios éticos, legais, sociais, dessas novas neurotecnologias, e estamos coordenando um subprojeto de aplicação de métodos psicométricos de ciência de dados na avaliação das alterações do funcionamento neuropsicológico. E um tema que nós temos discutido, que para mim é uma abordagem importante para esse último desafio que eu trouxe para vocês e que pode ajudar a orientar a construção dos projetos, é a questão da gente trabalhar com uma abordagem de Responsible Research and Innovation, que significa o quê? Cuidar do futuro através da gestão coletiva da ciência e da inovação no presente, assegurando que o design, o desenvolvimento e a disseminação da inovação científico-tecnológica ocorra de maneira ética, inclusiva, reflexiva e adaptativa. Esse site, RRE Tools, ele tem alguns meios, algumas técnicas, e essa questão da pesquisa responsável, né, do RRI, ela conversa, né, tá no âmbito do Conselho, das recomendações do Conselho de Inovação Responsável em Neurotecnologia, da OCDE, que trabalha, né, com 9 princípios para a promoção da inovação responsável, priorizando a avaliação de segurança, promovendo a inclusão, fomentando a colaboração científica, permitindo uma deliberação social, capacitando órgãos de supervisão e assessoria, protegendo os dados cerebrais, né, e psicológicos, pessoais e outras informações, promover cultura de administração e confiança no setor público e privado e antecipando e monitorando o uso ou potencial uso indevido, não intencional. E, nesse sentido, o Brasil aderiu a essas recomendações no ano passado, né, em fevereiro de 2022, esse é o documento que está sendo colocado. Então, esse é um trabalho que nós temos desenvolvido com essa missão, né, de trabalhar não apenas o desenvolvimento tecnológico científico, mas também a responsabilidade do desenvolvimento dessas neurotecnologias. E, por fim, antes de passar para o Philip, eu queria trazer, né, as fronteiras que isso tem aberto. Eu queria exemplificar com 2 artigos. Esse artigo à esquerda da tela, Emergent Abilities of Large Scale Models, ele trabalha justamente com a noção de que quando você aumenta as redes de dados, né, o tamanho das redes e o volume de massa de dados, algumas habilidades começam a emergir, e eles até não sabem nomear muito bem coisas que não foram programadas. O que seriam essas habilidades? São coisas que surgem quando você aumenta o volume de massa de dados analisada por uma rede que não estavam inicialmente programadas para acontecerem. Tá? Então, basicamente, a rede ela ganha um aumento de performance como se houvesse tido uma aprendizagem, né, de algo que ninguém sabe o que é. E isso tem acontecido com recorrência nesses modelos de linguagem. E aí, enfim, é um artigo interessante. E aí, em 2023, ambos estão no ArchiveSec, que é é um repositório, né, aberto, mas de papers que ainda não passaram não foram publicados em revista. O Emergent Ability já foi publicado, né, no Translations on Machine Learning Research, mas esse aqui é um artigo novo que está lá no Archive, e basicamente ele, então, a partir desse surgimento, né, dessas habilidades emergentes, ele advoga a criação de um novo campo, que seria Machine Psychology, né, para investigar esses comportamentos, para investigar todos esses elementos. Então, do ponto de vista até de novas habilidades, novos, talvez, programas de pós-graduação que pode surgir, né, novas linhas que a gente nem imagina que estão chegando aí, a gente pode começar a pensar numa psicologia transformada, né, uma psicologia que vai trabalhar também a psicologia das máquinas. Então, eu queria agradecer a todo mundo pela oportunidade. Esse QR Code para vocês entrarem em contato comigo, tem aí meus contatos também. E, no final, nós podemos abrir para dúvidas. Obrigado.
Muito obrigada, Alexandre, pela sua fala, sempre inspiradora, sou fã. Eu queria dizer que aqui entre nós também está a professora Liliane, né, da Assessoria de Assuntos Internacionais. Ela veio para mediar esse bate-papo e ela pode fazer a tradução no final para as perguntas para o Felipe. Aí, Liliane, se você quiser falar com o professor também para... né, fazer.
Muito obrigada, Mônia. Boa tarde a todos. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to have you all here. Você prefere que eu fale em inglês agora, Mônia?
Sim, melhor.
So, on behalf of the International Office of the Federal University of São João del Rei, I would like to give you a warm welcome, but not only for our international guests, but also for our colleagues in Brazil and at UFSJ as well. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Dr. Serpa, for this excellent talk. I learned a lot. And well, I deal with languages, so I want to get in touch. I want a copy of the presentation. I want to invite you to talk to the people from the language department. Well, I love it. So thank you, Professor Mônia Silva, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. I apologize that I arrived 10 minutes late because in my mind, the lecture would be at 7 p.m. And when I saw it was already in progress, so I apologize for that. But I came in time to watch this great presentation by Dr. Serpa. So thank you all for being here. And it's a pleasure to be here, especially to Dr. Leitner. I don't know if I pronounced your name in the correct way, but it's a pleasure to have you here, although it's only virtually. I hope you can come here one day face to face to visit our university and to meet you in person. So welcome once more. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation. It's an honor for me too. And actually, I share your hope that one day I can also visit you in person. That's
okay. So nice. Moina is going to have this commitment to arrange a way to invite you and bring you in person.
Be a great pleasure. Now we will display Philip's speech with automatic subtitles provided by YouTube in Portuguese. Philip recorded a presentation for us and we will watch now. Mateus, please.
Pode compartilhar, Alexandre.
Posso? Ah, beleza. Eu já estou compartilhando aqui e vou começar.
Oh, thanks, Alexandre.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening from Luxembourg, and thank you very much for the invitation in order to share some insights and share some observations on one of the most interesting technologies at the moment, I'd say. My name is Philip Sonnleitner. I'm a senior research scientist working at the University of Luxembourg at the Luxembourg Center for Educational Testing, to be more specific. And I'm the method lead there, so everything test development related goes over my desk, more or less. Which is also the reason why I'm talking today about this topic, because we cannot longer ignore it, that artificial intelligence is out there. And that's why I was forced, but at the same time also super excited, also to check in a little bit on myself also, and also to research and take a look what's currently going on and what kind of impact these new technologies might have on our daily business, on our daily work of testing and assessment. Before we start, in case you wonder, Luxembourg, where is this country exactly? Admittedly, it's a very tiny country. It's at the heart of Europe, squeezed into between France, Belgium, and Germany. 600,000 inhabitants approximately, and a heavily multicultural country. So 3 official languages. I'm also going to talk about this a little bit later on. French, German, Luxembourgish, and many people speaking also different languages. So it's a pot of different cultures and languages. Super interesting to live here, and also super beautiful. So we have nice valleys, it's green, we have nice buildings. Small river valley that you can see here is directly at the city center, and we also have many castles. So in this beautiful surrounding, the Luxembourg Center for Educational Testing is quite busy. On one hand, with the National Large-Scale Assessment, the so-called Épreuves standardisées, in which we are doing the annual data collections. So we are more or less monitoring or evaluating how well students can read and comprehend text passages in French and in German. We also check how well they can do math and solve math problems. In Luxembourg, since it's so small, we have the pleasure of testing the whole cohort each time. So starting in grade 1, every second year we're testing the whole cohort, which gives us also a pretty nice and interesting longitudinal database on how student competencies are developing over time and which demographic background variables are influencing this development. And attached to this mission of assessing and monitoring the school system, there are many individual research projects that we are also working on. One, for example, how language develops in multilinguals. This is one of the most important topics. Then also how early competence is developing more or less, but also many heavily assessment-focused research topics. For example, how can we assess complex problem solving? But lately, also, how can we automatically generate items, test tasks that we are using in our tests? And last topic that we now started was, can we use artificial intelligence in a certain way in assessment, and which consequences does this have? What are the benefits and the disadvantages? And I hope to be able to share some insights in it, because it's a highly dynamic research field. Lots of things are going on. And the latest research that I saw was this summer when I attended a conference. So some things that I'm going to present today are not already published. They were based on the conference. So it's really the latest research that is out there. But before we move on to this future technology, I'd like to talk a bit about the old school item development. And I consider myself an old school item developer. I'm in this business for more than 15 years. I've developed tests and items to measure almost every competency that is out there, starting from intelligence test items to complex problem solving tests and computer-based scenarios, reading comprehension tests, mathematical ability tests, and so on and so on. So I've seen it all, I'd say. But the process or the standardized procedures, how to develop items for these different tests, is almost always the same. You start out with a definition of what you exactly want to measure. Then you move on to the design. So how should the test tasks directly look like? What kind of response format are you using? How is it administered? Who are you going to test and when, under which circumstances, and so on. And then you move on to evaluating the quality of the items, evaluating the validity of the items. So do you really measure what you intend to measure? And if this goes well, the items enter a final item pool and are used in testing. If it doesn't go so well, they go back into the design phase, and you think about, together with others, with colleagues, you think a lot about why it went south with this item and what you could change in order to make it better. And this kind of procedure usually is conducted by groups of item developers. In our case, it's teachers. So groups of teachers are sitting together around a table, and then for a couple of hours, they try to be creative and think about how best we can assess certain student competencies. This is pretty time intense. So you spend lots of afternoons sitting in meeting rooms, more or less successful, and at the end, you have a couple of test items. I'd say per hour, on average, that we would develop 4 to 5 items if we are quick. This costs also a lot of money. And there was one estimate, there's one estimate out there, it was published in 2009 by Rodner. And back then in 2009, and now consider latest inflation and everything over the past 15 years. So back in 2009, the development and the evaluation of one test item cost around $2,500 to $3,500 per test item. When you consider that a test is consisting of 30 test items, you quickly see that this is a pretty expensive business that we are in. Lots of manpower goes into it, organizational stuff, then the data administration, the data analysis, and so on and so on. So it's time intense and it costs a lot. At the same time, the models that we are currently using, the psychometric or statistical models that we are using to evaluate the items, are a bit simple or are more on the simpler side, with the big advantage that it's comprehensible. How we are modeling more or less the response behavior of the test takers, that we understand what they are able or capable of doing. But on the other hand, they are pretty simplistic. And yeah, maybe this shows I should be a bit faster or move on a little bit. No, but what I wanted to say is we understand the current models, but this comes at the price that they are very rough. So we cannot model complex behavior. Usually we are aiming for only measuring one competency at a time with one test item. And how plausible this is another question. And the current state of test development at Lucid, we were, I have to say, pretty proud, more or less, that during the past couple of years, we introduced automatic item generation, not to be mistaken with artificial intelligence artificially generated items. But we introduced cognitive model-based item development. So we were sitting down with the same teachers, but instead of developing single items, we were developing cognitive models. So what is going on in the students' head when they're solving math problems, and how could we measure this in a systematic way in test tasks? Then we set up these models, and based on these models, we fed them into an algorithm that changed certain parameters and then automatically produced many, many different items. On the left-hand side of this slide, you see 2 automatically generated items out of this. It's about measuring the competency of counting in young kids. And back then we asked from our illustrator that we are cooperating with, that he really gives us each single t-shirt as a separate file, more or less. And the algorithm then, depending on if we want a harder item with many more elements to be counted, the algorithm then determines how many t-shirts are shown in the item and plots them on the background graphic. This worked really quite well. So with the models that we developed around 40 models. We could generate, I think, 10 or 11 billion of mathematics items already. And this was a huge game changer for us. So it reduced the costs of math items a lot for us. And at the same time, we were using the cognitive models that were used to create the items also to get more fine-grained feedback out of them. Because now we exactly knew how we manipulated the items, what we would expect in the kids that they would master counting only up until 5, with 5 elements to count, or counting up until 10 when there were more elements around. And we were using this cognitive diagnostic models. On the other hand, to give more fine-grained feedback. This is the current state, I'd say. We were pretty happy until last year happened with this huge revolution of artificial intelligence. Then I'd say it became publicly known what is possible, what is out there, what machine learning algorithms are capable to do, what transformers, large language models are capable to do. And we had to reassess our daily business and also our innovativeness. The consulting company Gartner, it's a US-based company. Each year they're publishing a so-called tech hype cycle. Every time it follows the same line. So each introduced technology follows the same cycle more or less, where you would say it starts with an innovation trigger. So a new technology is invented and enters the market, and very quickly expectations are rising and skyrocketing even until to a peak of inflated expectations. So at the very beginning, when a new technology is introduced, everybody thinks, wow, this is amazing. We probably can solve all our problems that we are currently having, until you enter this trough of disillusionment. And then you discover the first limits of the new technology. You see what is possible, but also what is not possible with this new technology. Until after this realization of the limits, you again enter the slope of enlightenment, where you say you have a more realistic assessment and evaluation of this technology, and you see what definitely is possible, what you can do, until the plateau of productivity, where you say, okay, this is a mature technology. Now we know the limits, the advantages and disadvantages, and now we can use it properly. And the questions that arise now are, for example, where do we stand with artificial intelligence? And Gartner in 2023, so this year, put, for example, generative artificial intelligence at the highest peak of inflated expectations. So right now, really the world is believing we can do anything with it. And it's super, super amazing when you just look at the examples. But this valley of disillusionment will follow for sure. And the questions that arise for educational assessment now is, how can we enhance item writing? Can we replace field testing through AI? What about automated response scoring? Or on the other hand, how objective and fair is artificial intelligence also? And when you look at what is out there, more or less, you get already some responses. Again, it's super, super new. This technology in educational assessment, we are right at the brink of a huge change concerning this. And when you look at item writing and those algorithms that are out there, for example, ChatGPT, I'm pretty sure many of you have already interacted with ChatGPT. It's simply amazing. You give a small prompt and it creates in an instant a wall of text exactly with the specifications that you're asking for. The same is true in the meantime also for the creation of images. So when you think back about our items that I showed you before, the model-based items, we heavily relied on images. This could also be created now in an instant by just asking DALL-E in order to create the specific images we need. Right now, we were asking the illustrator we are working with for years. We invested a lot of time and effort and money and resources in order to get to a very good cooperation. We won't change this quickly, of course, but having such algorithms like DALL-E might lead that some of the items can be also generated in an artificial manner, and this very quick. Right now, there are even artificially created videos out there. For example, the company Synthesia offers a service that a training transcript can be directly transformed into a video in which a nice young lady explains everything to you. And this might come in very handy for instructions, for tests, for example, when it is necessary to explain how a test works, how the students should answer to a test in a specific way. Right now, we are only providing text. We're expecting that the students can read, have a certain ability, a certain reading ability. Otherwise, they might be hampered in understanding what is really asked from them. If it's possible to quickly generate videos on the fly of these instructions, it's also possible to reduce many, many barriers that some students currently are having due to a different language background or whatever. And that this is not only science fiction, but is already currently applied. This is something that I learned also this year. And maybe some of you also already encountered it because the famous app, freemium app, Duolingo, already makes use of this. Duolingo is a language learning app. It's free unless you want to unlock a premium aspect. And they have a monthly user base of more than 37 million users. So just imagine the data that is coming in, but also imagine the huge amount of practice, training, and assessment items they need to develop. Because if some of them are out there for the tests, they are very quickly known everywhere. They are also offering a certification in English, for example. This is the Duolingo English test. And what they did, following their concept of digital first assessment, that everything is done digitally. So the development of the items is done digitally, the presentation, the data collection and the data analysis, feedback, whatever, everything is done digitally. And they are already using language models, large language models, in this case, BERT, it's a transformer, so-called transformer model, in order to generate word-based items, but also passage-based items. So based on a model that is trained on different texts, reading passages, it's possible for the Duolingo company to quickly generate short passages with certain characteristics and then derive some questions on it. So they are already using this technology to create and generate many, many different test items in order to offer them for training, but also for testing purposes. So the first step in the old school item development process is already solved right now. The second step with field testing new items, also here are super interesting developments. And this is what I meant before with the presentation at the conference this year that I was lucky to attend. Also at the company, they are offering English literacy exams. And they took one example of an exam including 29 multiple choice questions and then used the so-called Roberta model in order to answer these multiple choice questions. Roberta is pre-trained on 160 gigabytes of English text and can answer multiple choice and open-ended questions. And the interesting thing that they now did was they created 5,000 variations of Roberta, of this artificial intelligence more or less, and made this intelligence systematically dumber by deleting certain weights. The knowledge base of such a transformer model is more or less consisting of relations between words. So if two words mean approximately the same, they are synonyms, they have a very tight connection, and also similar connections to other words, more or less. Those are so-called weights, and by deleting a certain proportion of these weights, Hotaka, the researcher conducting this study, created Robertas with different degrees of literacy knowledge, of vocabulary knowledge. And those responses from Roberta were then compared to real-life responses from third-grade students. And the results were super exciting. So at first, it was proven that the manipulation worked quite well. You can see it in this chart. So on the x-axis, you see the known vocabulary starting out with 100%, deleted 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%, and so on. And on the y-axis, you see the test score of Roberta. And you see the weaker Roberta was supposed to be the lower the score, with a correlation of minus 0.86. And this for a start was pretty interesting to see, and a proof that the manipulation worked quite well to create different kinds of, different artificial test takers of a varying degree of abilities. These data, it was also fed into psychometric models, in this case a 2PL model, and then item characteristic curves were studied. So characteristics of the items were estimated based on the artificial responses and then on the real-life responses. And you can see that at least for most of the items, it's really pretty similar. So it was a good estimate, more or less, of how this item is going to perform also in a real-world sample. For other items, on the other hand, they didn't work at all. So it was not the case that 100% of the items were predicted well. It was only for a certain proportion of the items. Nevertheless, when you take a look at the results, it was pretty impressive. Because at the end, item difficulty estimates were correlated again and plotted in this graph, again based on AI responses and on human responses, and the correlation was 0.99. So they concluded that field testing in the future could definitely be, at least to a certain extent, enhanced by using language models, large language models, by using AI. And at least it would work quite well to weed out items that might be problematic. So as an additional, at least as an additional quality check for the future, these models already work. And I found a cartoon online where I thought this might fit quite well in here. I adapted it a bit, but it might lead to a situation where the test developer on the left-hand side is saying or telling a colleague, hey, look, I provide a single bullet point, and AI turns this bullet point into a full-blown test item that I can pretend that I wrote. On the other hand, there is the test taker sitting our game in test development and item writing. Test takers probably will do so too. And in my opinion, it's not so much the question of, do we see this pointless arms race, or will there be a change of the measured construct too? And here a very interesting model introduced by Rosenberg in the 70s comes into play, the so-called technology S-curve, that states as soon as a new technology is introduced, it goes through 3 phases, more or less. There's the starting phase, during which there is only an improvement of existing procedures. And when you think back of item writing and field testing, this is exactly what happens right now. But afterwards, there is the so-called disruptive phase, where we really understand the technology's full potential, and then it also can be exploited. But it will also lead to a change of the existing procedures, how we think about item writing, how we think about field testing, maybe also how we think about assessment at all. And then this technology enters the last phase, the so-called maturity phase, where we also see and reach the technology's limits. And when we think about how the measured constructs might change, some concepts of automated scoring come into question, where we say, okay, we can in real time really look students over the shoulder when they are creating texts, when they are writing essays. Although essay scoring, automated essay scoring is around since the 60s with the first attempts, right now it's much more advanced and much more sophisticated, using machine learning models that are trained based on human raters or on certain rules. And in real time, we can assess whether the student not only makes errors in grammar and usage of certain words, orthography, whatever, but also macro features, like how is the essay organized? How are the arguments within the essay organized? How is the essay developed in terms of, do the paragraphs build on each other? Does it make sense? Also, short constructed responses can be scored in a better way. Specific contents in their keywords, more or less. This is now all possible in real time. Unfortunately, for this presentation, we didn't make it work to get a real-time translation to Brazilian Portuguese. We tried, but apparently this is also no problem at all anymore. And this change of measured constructs also has to do with computer-based testing and assessment, of course. And there is also an interesting concept that is around for a couple of years now, which is called stealth assessment, where every action, every single click, whatever, of the test taker, the interaction of the test taker and the computer program or the test is captured in log files. And this huge pile of data is usually very messy and very unstructured. We worked with this kind of data ourselves, tried different kinds of multiple regressions on this data, but it quickly turned out that this is super complex because the models that we were using were just not adapted or used more or less fitted the structure of the data, that they are so huge and messy. And this is also where machine learning now really is a game changer, because in an instant, it can summarize the data on different hierarchical levels. And although it's a black box approach, nevertheless, it can lead to very interesting interpretations of what is going on. And this might also be a way more suited approach to dealing with time series data, because when you interact with a certain computer interface, your actions are depending on your former actions. When you open up a menu and select a certain option, of course, these are time steps that are depending on each other. And the current psychometric models that we are using have a hard time in dealing with such time-dependent data. This is a huge issue. newer machine learning models, on the other hand, they do not really care, or they have a better way of dealing with this property of data. This also allows to provide feedback in real time. So for the first time at the moment when a student gives us answers or responses, we could also at the same time ask, how do you mean this? What do you mean by this? Is it really what you want to do? Why? So we can totally ask different questions. It's really much, much closer to a learning process, or to better understand what's going on in the kid when working with a test, instead of solely focusing on, has a test task been solved or not solved? So this is a huge, huge change. Besides this excitement that for sure is out there, you saw it also in this hype cycle from Gartner, where AI definitely right now is at the peak. There are, and also not surprising, on the other hand, many threats to the potential of it. And first and foremost, there, of course, is this old principle, garbage in, garbage out. So how you train the models, these language models, when you train them on faulty data or on poor texts, whatever, you can also expect, okay, that the responses or the created content that gets out of it is poor too. This has huge implications for the kind of texts that can be generated by these models. And the danger is really there that tests will narrow down in the scope. When I'm thinking about the reading comprehension tests that we are administering, the risk is really there that the texts will become more technical, for example. So this is something that we are currently trying to find out. How diverse can the generated texts be? Can we really match the diversity of teachers writing these texts and offering them for us in order to develop some items? On the other hand, when you have machine learning algorithms that are used in order to score essays and so on, and they are trained on human training sets, the risk is also there that you inherit bias from these human training sets. So when certain wording, certain vocabulary was an indicator in the past to human raters that this student probably comes from low socioeconomic status households, and probably gives away some clues concerning the language, some expressions that are only used, and therefore the overall scoring is lower. If this has been a bias in the past, chances are high that algorithms trained on these training sets inherit this bias. So this is something that really needs to be checked in the huge companies working with this data. They are aware of this bias, and under the term diversity, they are really trying to create more fair algorithms, but it's very difficult to tell to what extent this really works out. Because in the end, it's a black box of what's going on in these models. They are so complex, we cannot directly grasp how the weights that these models are using, how these weights come into place, what they really understand. They are multidimensional, so we cannot really grasp immediately what is out there. This is what I meant with the difference to current psychometric models that we are using, that they are much simpler. We can easily understand what is going on. And as a matter of fact, there is also no standardized procedure yet for validation. With huge amounts of generated items, for example, and this was also the case for our model-based approaches, you end up in a situation where previous or old school validation processes don't work anymore. You cannot administer a certain batch of items correlated with an already existing test and then check what concurrent validity, how high it is or whatever, if it works. Because if we are speaking of 10 billion of test items, we cannot all administer them. So is it really a solution to use a Roberta model now solving all these items and more or less neglect field testing? We don't know yet. There are no standards out there yet. This is so new. And the examples that I told you of the Duolingo app or also with the field testing, those examples, interestingly, do not come from universities. No, instead they come from huge companies. So currently, right now, the field of AI and educational assessment, this field is driven by companies. The innovations are coming from companies. And this is pretty tricky because there is no control instance anymore. When you want to see how these algorithms in the background work, you cannot look into it because they are intellectual property. And this is protected by the companies. So it's impossible to check what's going on in the back. It's just, again, a black box. It's hidden. And universities right now are really lagging more or less in the implementation of these innovations. I think the Lucid is a typical example for this. We just are witnesses what is going on out there. We are not the drivers of the innovations ourselves. It's just a question how quickly we can adapt these innovations. But it's it's the way it is. Let's see how this is going to change. And there are also still many ethical or questions related to law that are unanswered right now. So can we really use generated content for free in our tests? Or do we need to pay some copyright fees, more or less, to artists on which the generated images are based on? This is a very complex terrain. There are some approaches to solve this, but they haven't been solved up until now. So this is still open, and that's why I think if you really do not develop everything in-house, like Duolingo is doing, it's a bit tricky if you can already use it or not. And last but not least, I'd say acceptance is a huge topic, because when I'm talking to the test developers at the Lucid, when I'm talking to the teachers, when I'm talking to some students, the acceptance could be bigger. It's I'd say a healthy skepticism. There are also some fears, more or less, if we are going to be replaced with the test development by algorithms. I do not think that they're justified, because what comes out right now of these generators still needs some kind of refinement. On the other hand, it would open up our time budget again for other, maybe more meaningful stuff to do. So I still see it as an opportunity and a huge advantage to use this technology to support our old school test development procedures, but we'll see. Acceptance is a huge issue, and we'll see how this plays out. This was a very quick look into, well, at least it was my take on how artificial intelligence is shaping educational assessment right now and over the years. It's a super exciting field. I hope it was somewhat interesting also for you. If you would like to dig deeper, I put the references in the back of the slides. And of course, we will share the slides with you. And if everything goes well, I think I will also be there in order to answer some questions. Thank you very much for your attention. Thanks again for the invitation. I was super happy to share this information with you. And good night from Luxembourg.
So thank you for your presentation, Professor Philip. And now we can start the questions. If I don't know if somebody have questions? Comments? Podemos também perguntar em português. A Liliane está aqui para nos ajudar, né, Liliane?
Well, if while the people think about the questions, I would like to be the first one. And thank you, Dr. Philip Leitener. It was a great presentation, especially because I'm from the languages department and we deal every day with TOEFL applications and this kind of assessment. So my questions to both of you, Dr. Leitener and also Dr. Serpa, is first, the kind of psychometrics used by TOEFL, for example, that is one of the most used assessment tools for language, to check language proficiency here. One of them is TOEFL, right? One of the most famous ones. So the psychometric used already uses artificial intelligence. Do you envision that it can be improved by artificial intelligence? First question. And the second, do you envision also advances in artificial intelligence, especially in language assessment, that can consider, for example, pragmatics? Because we know that this technology is able to check language structure, usage of vocabulary and the grammar in the appropriate format, but pragmatics, the appropriateness of language in a particular context. So do you envision AI can do that one day, or is it already doing that? So thank you for your attention.
Alexandra, you want to go first, or?
Please, could you go?
Okay. It's a super interesting, important question. Actually, I cannot say if the TOEFL already is using it. I'd say right now they're still very conservative in the psychometric models that they are using because they are approved, and they also need to justify how they come to the scores and what scores they are giving. So right now, I'd say most of the field is just experimenting with it, except some companies that offer training where there are less consequences to it. But I could imagine that pretty soon they will shift also to new methodologies, especially as you mentioned yourself, that these algorithms are getting more and more refined. And you were asking especially about the pragmatics. And in one of the examples I was reviewing, right now, these models are capable in order to distinguish, for example, concerning the word to check. And it's a totally different meaning if you're saying, I'm writing a check for you, or let me check this if it's correct. It's going in this direction. With written speech in texts, the algorithms can already distinguish it. So I'd say it's also definitely possible in speech, in interviews, for example, in interview situations. And this can also be linked in the future, I'd say, when chatbots, for example, are used. So when there is an interaction, when the assessment instrument starts communicating with you and starts creating these contexts and these pragmatics, knows what it is creating and then justifies and values more or less what you're giving back. When we will arrive there, I cannot say. Maybe we are already there. Then we are back again that we do not really know what's going on at the big companies, but that it is possible, I'm pretty sure. But right now, to sum it up, I'd say when these certifications are on stake, it's the use of pretty conservative psychometric models, because they still have an explanatory character. So we do understand what's going on, what kind of response behavior is modeled, that those new models are lacking. They are good in prediction, more or less, in order to predict certain criteria. This is good understanding, good speech production, but how the model arrives there, we do not entirely know right now.
Thank you.
Just to complement the Philip's answer. So I've shown one paper from ETS. So ETS is the owner of TOEFL test, but I don't know if they are using artificial intelligence, but I shared the same view from Philip, that probably they are not using because they need to reach high standards to put it into the production. So, but they have a long tradition to develop strong and deeper psychometric models for assessment. So probably they are using something that's very interesting, very very innovative, even without the formal use of artificial intelligence. So it is.
Thank you.
So no more questions?
I have
I have a second
I have
question,
a question.
but I'm going to wait to the others, okay?
Denise,
May
Professor.
I?
Denise.
Are you listen to me? I have a question. Yes.
Yes, now
Thank
yes.
Yes. First, thank you for your presentation. It was really interesting and sometimes difficult to imagine where we are today in this kind of subject. I consider myself a test developer, a node school test developer too, and I was imagine what kind of professionals do we need for this kind of development, because I can't imagine myself working with artificial intelligence. I have to have with me people who understand what all the implications of this technology. So I'd like to know about you, what kind of professionals we have to have together. Thank you.
You want to go first this time, or no?
Let's do that.
Okay. It's actually a very good question, because when you start looking at the field, who is playing around with this new technology, it clearly comes from data scientists, and I'd say they have a very different approach compared to psychologists, compared to people being trained in psychometrics, being trained in ethics, and so on. As long as it works mathematically concerning the prediction and so on, it works for them. At least this would be my impression, that there are fewer questions concerning the implications, concerning validity, concerning fairness, and so on. As long as it works to predict certain outcomes, then the model is perfect and it's fine, and we do not need to start any more questions. So if you want to look at this this problem, who is going to develop our tests in the future, my hope would be the same people are still developing these tests, because the training we get when we are studying psychology, test development, it really grounds you and makes you humble to understand that it is really, really different to make inferences from certain behaviors, from certain test-taking behaviors, to a hidden construct that we cannot directly observe. And this very critical questioning all the time, is it really the right construct that we are measuring? What influences are there, and so on and so on. My hope would be that this is equally important in the future, that we also need to consciously think about ethics in test development, that we really fix this in the test development process. Because when you just come from a very pragmatic point of view, that we can create the content, and more or less a data scientist could train the models on existing item databases and say, just create new stuff, new items based on existing tests. This could be done without a problem. But the critical review, the critical assessment and evaluation of the content would be gone, because they are not subject matter experts. They are not trained psychologists really critically reflecting on what kind of stimuli are we presenting. So my hope would be, it would be a team going hand in hand between data scientists, but still having psychologists as a control instance and as a check and balance system.
I agree with Philip. So what I am experiencing with my work at INCT, working with data scientists, especially people from technologies undergraduation course. So people really do not understand what we are doing. They are not subject matters specialists, and they do not know the implications of the results, of the outputs. So they know very well, they are very trained to do optimization to get the best fit index, but sometimes for us in health, in psychology, the best model is not the choose one. So sometimes we need to go do a step forward and get something that's not very accurate. Sorry, to get something that's not very accurate, and but we could explain what we are doing, what we are modeling in that. So there are several gray areas, shaded areas between this cooperation that we will need to learn to have a clear and concise answer for this question, Professor Bandeira. But in my view, in the near future, we have some specialities or some areas that we could act as now. If we are not someone who would like to be a psychometrician, or if we are not able to understand the models, probably will emerge a lot of solutions that will make it more accessible, as programming is more accessible with low-code systems. So they will have low-code artificial intelligence solutions that will facilitate the accessibility of people that sometimes could not be a deeper understander of all the statistics and all the technology that could arise from this area. So, but I believe that that could implicate in change that we need to foresee for psychology, for undergraduation course, especially this segmentation of human science, of biological science, of technology science. Probably we are going to a convergence in terms of ability. So everyone need to be good, or at least have access to math, to language, to human, to philosophy, in any course that they want to do, because most the technology is in a pathway that is integrating in, and you need to be worried about all the implications for society, for technology, for systems, and for mathematics that it could arise. So it is my view about this, your question, but thank you.
Maybe
Thank you.
maybe one more thing to add what Alexandre just said. I absolutely agree that it has to go in this direction, because as you also nicely pointed out in your presentation, AI is here and it is here to stay, and it won't go away, especially not for sections where you need to generate content. And test development is always about generating content. And now we have a technology at hand that does this in an instant, and it doesn't cost anything. So chances are pretty high that companies are just going with the cheapest solution. So we're just generating stuff. And I think that's why, and this was one of the reasons why we are shifting now in this direction and trying to adopt this technology. If we better understand what is going on, we can also better highlight what are the differences compared to human-made items and tests. So we need to better understand the risks of this new technology, the limits of this new technology, in order to better justify why it is still a good idea to have a psychologist in the pool, and that it's not only about the model or the language model that is creating the content. So we do not really have a choice. It is here, and now let's see how to best integrate it in our processes.
Liliane?
Very much.
I think you almost answered my question, because I would mention that artificial intelligence is here, no way to go back. And I was worried about the issue of plagium. So many people are discussing, for example, the impact of that at the university. You mentioned that the major developers of this kind of new technology is concentrated in the companies. They are the innovators. But the universities are consumers of those innovations. And many people have been discussing about the issue of plagium, because we know that ChatGPT, for example, can produce a text in 20 seconds, what a human can do in one day or one afternoon. But anyway, the old scholars, the old teachers and the faculty and professors, we had means of going there and check on the internet if they were copying a text that was available at the internet. We learned how to do that, but at the moment we cannot control that. So I would like you to comment a little bit about that and the future of text production and assessment of text production, considering the issue of plagium.
May I start that time? So in my presentation, I told about the responsible research and innovation. So I believe that this kind of approach, and this approach I didn't mention, is used in Europe for any kind of for all organizations that are funding, that are making grants for innovation. So this kind of discussion involves in their principles, in their recommendations, a way that private and public sector, which includes universities, of course, to apply the same guidelines, the same approach in terms of transparency, in terms of this collective manipulation or administration of research and innovation. So I believe that we need to improve those ways of communication and to understand that companies could do science too. So we are now we have now in the Western society, probably in the Oriental society too, well-educated people in amount that you never had in our history as a global human community. So we have a high skilled and high scholarship people into the company. So we need to provide stimulus, public stimulus, government stimulus to companies do science inside their grounds. And in the other way, we need to have ways to check and to audit and to merge the same good practices that the universities have done in the last centuries around the transparency, around the research methodology. So I believe there is no other way than a societal contract about what I'm doing. So because if you just believe that people will do that by themselves, they will not do that. They never did that, so they will not change. People will not change. People always do the same wrong things. We are seeing all the wars and all the things that's happening abroad. So I believe that we need to have clear standards about what we could do, what we could accept, and what the market could accept, because the market drives the company's behavior. So we need to be clear with the society about the good standards. And we have a lot of problems in the startups world. So I am living in this startup world since 2019. So most of the time seeing companies doing wrong things, doing bullshit, and giving some promise that will not be reached by their products, and every time they are trying to bullshit the market. So and some companies in the other way are structuring good practice, good market, and they need to be promoted. And I'm saying that because I believe that we are doing that at Metacognitive. So we have these both sides. At the university, we have this agreement with Federal University of Minas Gerais, with Mackenzie University here. We are every time testing our products. We are every time trying to do science, but we have also a market side that we are selling products. But we are selling products that we really believe that we have published evidence. So and Philip give us Duolingo practice. Duolingo, this area is driving by Aline von Davia. She's a great researcher, well-renowned research in terms of psychometrics. So I believe in them because they hired good people to do the things. So I have no reason to believe that they are doing wrong things, or at least intentional wrong things, because we do wrong things every time. So I believe it's what I see for the future in terms of plagiarism or wrong practice, in terms of item generation, but also in any kind of technology application. I believe that the way is to convince and to educate the society about the good practice, and to give value to some people or companies or anyone that's doing that in the right way.
Yeah, maybe just to add a bit, it's going to be a huge challenge to hold these companies accountable for what they are doing. And you mentioned the example of Alina von Davir. It's a phenomenon that we can observe right now, that the leading figures in psychometrics are now switching to private companies. And I don't think that it's their main motivation is money. I don't think this. I think it's just about the opportunities that they find there, the data they can work with. I mentioned it earlier with these, I don't know, 35 million users of Duolingo per month. They get data sets there that are much more interesting compared to data sets that you can collect in a traditional way at the university, where you need to apply for funds and then you need to get the ethics approval. It's a more interesting research field being out there in the organizations and working in the field. I think this is one of the main motivations. And on a smaller scale, with how to avoid problems, I chose the cartoon also a bit for these reasons, because when we are making it ourselves easier in order to create the tests, test takers can also make their life easier by using ChatGPT responding to our tests. And I think this is going to be, it's another reason why we need to invest a lot of thinking and a lot of work, that we change the assessments in our courses, for example. Because just asking students for essays won't work anymore. Then we will read highly likely also automatically generated texts and productions. And what I stumbled upon this week was an example from a teacher who invested a lot of thinking also in how she could circumvent this. And she told the students proactively use it. She made them read certain books, then told them you can use ChatGPT, whatever you want to like, in order to produce essays that summarize what you read, but then criticize the text. So she changed really the assignments that they needed to critically reflect on what these language models produced. And then they found out, oh, those language models, they got certain details wrong. Because this is also a phenomenon, it's called hallucinations. When the model just doesn't know something, it makes stuff up. It's not that the model says, stop, I don't know anything about this fact, it just invents this fact. And so this triggered some kind of critical thinking in the students, that they say, oh, I cannot just do it in this very easy way. I really need to use it as a tool. But at the end, I'm the responsible one and I need to check. And it's, from my point of view, concerning the coursework, it really needs some rethinking of what we ask our students to do, being aware that this technology is out there and that it is for sure used. But integrating it, for example, comparing outputs of different models, or just trying what is the best you can produce using these models, I think this is the way forward. But I'm also still waiting for like best practice examples for courses. I think if you can provide some, this will spread around the world pretty quickly, because everybody is waiting for this.
Thank you. Great.
So, and more comments, questions? No? So, I would like to say thank you very much for this inspiring meeting. I'm thinking a lot of things about item development. It's a field that I love and have a lot of references, and it helped me a lot. Thank you, Professor Philip, Professor Alexandre, Liliane, and all people here. We have a lot of people watching on YouTube and here, and it was, for me, it was a great event. And I hope to find you soon, and Philip, come to visit us and come for a presential event to know São João del Rei, and it will be a great pleasure. Thank you for everybody, Mateus helping, Alexandre, who helped me a lot to organize this event, Marco, and Adam here, and Liliane, and Assim. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you very much also from my side for the invitation. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
very much. It was great being here. Congratulations for the choice of the issue that you discussed today. Very important for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Liliane. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.